Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee today, Tuesday, the 18th of March. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and appointment of substitute members, please.
Through you, Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Alan Chantler, Councillor Anne Addison and Councillor Catherine Russell.
Thank you. Do any members have a declaration of interest in the matters posted on this agenda? If so, please declare them and type. That's no. We've got two sets of minutes for those that are here on the 17th of December and also on the 21st of January. I have the minutes here. Are you happy for me to sign those as a true record of the things? If not, okay, thank you for that. Right, item 4, Chair's announcements. Under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulation 2014, members of the public or those party to the meeting are permitted to film, broadcast or report on the meeting, subject to the efficiency running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee's speaking procedure can address the committee. Those speaking are not permitted to ask questions of either members or officers. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the committee's discussion on any item. All speakers will have 5 minutes into which to make their statement. Participants addressing the planning committee will be advised when they have 60 seconds of their allotted time remaining and will be expected to cease talking immediately on being advised that their time is up. Speakers may be asked to remain seated after they have addressed the committee to answer questions from the planning committee members. There are no planned fire drills this afternoon, so if the alarm does sound, it is for real. The evacuation instruction will be given by the Democratic officer to my right, and the assembly point is the bottom of the steps on the mount, which is the big green bit over there on the steps to the far side. Could electronic devices please be switched off or onto silent mode? For those members using laptops, could I ask that they press F1 on their machine and a blue light will come on, indicating the sound is muted. The meeting will be broadcast on the Council's corporate YouTube channels. Therefore, when speaking, please use your microphones. That's that bit. The next bit, a housekeeping bit. This time of the year, flies congregate in this chamber, up in the ceiling there, and they could drop on you during the meeting. Do not be worried, they're on the way out at that point, but they're not dangerous. But just if you're going to have a drink, make sure that it hasn't been infected before you get to it. Thank you. For the benefit of the people on YouTube watching this, I will introduce the top table. On my far right is Diana Davis from Democratic Services. On my immediate right is Catherine Hall, our legal representative. Myself, Phil Bignell, chair of this committee. On my left, Simon Ellis, head of planning. Nikki Scaife, who is also head of major planning projects. Andrew Longbottom, who will be the case officer presented this afternoon. And finally, Hayley Usher at the end, who has come from highways. That's that bit. And the final bit. So there's no room for doubt as to what is being discussed this afternoon. I'll remind you of the following. Both the reserve matter applications are for the consideration of layout, scale in relation to compliance with the parameters already approved at outline stage, appearance and landscaping, in addition to that approved at outline stage. Paragraph 7.3, 7.4 and 7.6 of the officer's report clarifies the matters considered and approved at the outline stage, which was considered in June 2022. So they're not for determination today, including the principles of development, which has been done, traffic generation and access, air quality, and the developer's contribution and biodiversity net gain. Also, the principles of diversion or stopping up of Broadway SB 32 was accepted by members following the approval of the outline consent. A section 257 application submitted to the council for the stopping up of part of the SB 32, which is now the subject of an order made by the council, has been referred to the Secretary of State for determination following receipt of objections. This matter is subject to separate legislation and is not for consideration in respect to the determination of the reserve matter applications being considered today. So the Broadway is not a reason for refusing or deferring what's in front of us this afternoon. If permission for the for SB 32 is not given, then obviously plot 2 would not then be able to be built. but that's not for us to say yay or nay this afternoon. So without further ado, I call upon Andrew Longbottom to introduce, I was just going to tell you how it's going to happen. So Andrew's going to do one presentation for both plots. So the presentation is a presentation. We will then have two separate discussions. We'll have a discussion about plot one, then we'll have a discussion about plot two, and we will take a vote separately on each of those applications. They are separate applications, but Andrew will cover them both in his presentation, which I would ask him to give now, please. Thank you. Maybe just going to scroll on the top. So that you move that up. That's it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Few gremlins. Thank you, Chairman. The plan of the site is the site that was granted hybrid planning permission into 2021. The 34-acre site is shown in blue and is allocated under policy AL3 of the adopted South Northamptonshire Local Plan for business, general industrial, warehouse and distribution uses. The plan shows the application site and the main planning constraints of the area, these being the town confines shown here on a dotted line, the Eastern Neston Historic Park and Garden shown here in green, the special landscape area, which is this area hatched blue. There's a historic landfill site here, a potential wildlife site shown here, hatched. By the way, SB32 runs through the site here. Footpath SB1 runs to the north of the site towards Caldecott. Bridleway RK2 runs just to the east of the site in a northerly direction. And footpath RK1 further east again runs in a northerly direction. To the southwest of the site is Bridleway SP52. The area green here shown is a former railway line and is a green corridor. There are nearby residential properties at Williams Barn, the Brickyard, the Shires housing estate to the south, and some more residential properties along Holcott Lane here. The topography of the site falls approximately 21 metres from the around about this point here down to the lowest point, which is around about here. So I thought it'd be useful to first of all run through some of the plans that were approved as part of the hybrid planning permission before then turning to the applications we are considering today. So this is the parameters plan that was approved as part of the hybrid planning permission. It sets out the parameters the development should comply with. It sets out the total parameters of the site, which are shown in this area here, total floor area, total developable area, number of units, etc. And it also sets out the individual parameters for each development zone. So the areas we're looking at today is our zones C1 and C2 and zone C3. For these areas, the range of the finished floor levels are shown clearly here and here. And the building heights are shown in the parameters plan as well for zone C1 and C2, that is 21 metres, and for zone C3, 15.5 metres. These parameters were tested at the hybrid planning application stage and were found to be acceptable. In terms of visual impacts, all the buildings were tested through a visual and landscape impact assessment. So this is the illustrative master plan and shows the two buildings we're looking at today. And it's quite useful as it shows how the relationship falls between the plots we're looking at and the the existing routing of footpath by Bridleway SP32. And hopefully you can see it's blue on the plan, which isn't very clear, but it runs diagonally through plot 2 here. And this is a site sections plan which shows how the land levels relate to the proposed buildings. And we're looking mostly at cross section A here, which runs through the two buildings, which is the top cross section on this plan. As you see, the red line is the existing ground levels, and the plan shows how the cut and fill will work across the site. As you can see, plot 1 is actually, although it's the less high of the two buildings, is actually highest in the site because it's located on higher land. The maximum fill is at this point here, where it's approximately around about 8 meters above existing land levels. So this is the road system that was granted full planning permission as part of the hybrid application. And it shows the improvements to Northampton Road, including a new 2-metre wide shared footpath and cycleway along the side of Northampton Road. The new roundabout with the new approaches to the roundabout on each side. There's a new controlled crossing here. There's a new spine road which comes through the development and to a new design junction for Tifffield Road. There's also a new passing places on Tifffield Road, and Tifffield Road becomes left turn in and left turn out only as part of the proposals. So this plan shows the strategic landscaping that was approved as part of the hybrid planning permission. And it shows the landscaping that's already been agreed for the area between the development and the Tifffield Road and the attenuation basin, the existing landscaping along the side of the A43, which is to be retained. Again, at the top end of the site, this is the hybrid planning permission's strategic landscaping scheme, and it shows the proposed landscaping as part of the landscaping between A43 and the proposed plot 1, but also the landscaping along the part of the spine road as well. So now turning to the applications we're looking at today. We have 2 reserved matters to consider. The first is the application for plot 1 within Zone C, and the second is for plot 2 within Zone C. Matters relating to access to the hybrid planning application site were approved as part of the hybrid application, and both reserved matters to applications to plot 1 and plot 2 relate to layout, scale, appearance and landscaping of the development. The application also seeks to approve the submissions in relation to conditions covering crime prevention measures, hours of operation, site lighting, colour banding, sustainability, noise and vibration and drainage. Hence, issues relating to traffic movements or other means of accessing the site are not for consideration as part of these applications. The plan on the screen currently is the site location for plot 1, which is located at the east end of Zone C, and as such will be prominent when travelling along the A43 in the direction of Towcester. So this is the site plan for plot 1. So this is the new roundabout proposed, which is roundabout here. You've got the A43 that runs to the south of the site and the new spine road that runs to the north of the site. The proposed building is 153 metres in length and 91 metres in depth. There are a total of 18 HGV loading bays and parking for another 11 HGVs, sorry. In terms of car parking, a total of 122 parking spaces are proposed, with 10% of those being accessible and 10% and a further 10% being EV charging spaces. The plan here is for the proposed warehouse elevations. They are practical in their appearance and designed with a barreled roof to reduce the overall height of the elevations of the building. They are colour banded as required by the hybrid application, and they show a fade from dark grey to light grey, blending with the skyline. The proposed building is 13.5 metres to the eaves and 15.16 metres to the ridge, and this has been lowered since the report was written to ensure that the development complies with the maximum heights stated in the hybrid permission. So this is the proposed landscaping for plot 1. And as we saw from the earlier plans, this area here has all been designed as part of the hybrid permission. And this area covers the area between the two plots and is proposed to be mixed woodland planting with a number of specimen trees located within that area. And again, you have thicket planting with specimen trees located in these areas along the Spine Road. And you also have a number of semi-mature trees located within the car parking area. So these are the landscaping cross sections, and then the first two sections show the area between the two plots. So it shows how the level differences between plot 1 and plot 2 are accommodated, and the landscaping that is proposed on those areas. This is the cross section along the A43. So you've got the A43 here, and the embankment which is planted, and then plot 1. And again, this is another cross section of the A43, again with planting on the embankment. This is the cross section through the roundabout. So you've got through the car park, apologies. This is the roundabout here, and you've got the planting within the car park and the building shown here. The final cross sections shows the landscaping as it's proposed along the Spine Road. And so you've got the Spine Road located here and the service yard here and the landscaping between. And again, here. Now turning to second reserve matters application, and this is for the larger of the two buildings. It also includes the part of the site where the gradient is largest and is the plot that lies upon the route of Bridleway SP32. The site lies between the A43 and the attenuation area shown here, and this is the Spine Road that runs to the north of the site, and you have future zones for development as part of this hybrid permission to the north of the site, and Zone D over here. So this is the proposed layout for plot 2. You've got the Spine Road that runs to the north of the site, the attenuation pond here, and the A43 that runs to the south of the site. The proposed building is 341 metres in length and 118 metres in depth. It is set back from the boundary of the A43 with a service yard located in between the building and the A43. On the northern side of the building, there is a proposed office unit here, and with further service yard to the north and car parking located here. There are a total of 104 HGV parking spaces. In terms of car parking, there are a total of 360 car parking spaces proposed, 10% of which will be accessible and 10% will be EV charging. Again, the proposed warehouse takes the same design approach as it does to plot 1 with a barrelled roof to reduce the height of the elevations of the building. And again, the colour of the buildings are banded to accord with the hybrid permission and fades from dark grey to light grey to blend in with the skyline. The proposed building is 19 metres to the eaves and 20.6 metres to the ridge. And again, this building has been reduced in site since the committee report was published to make sure it accords with the parameters set out in the hybrid permission. There is a protruding 3-storey office block shown on the north elevation here as part of the development. This plan shows the proposed boundary treatments for plot 2, and I wanted to show this because this includes the noise attenuation fence, which goes around the majority of the building. So that's shown in light blue and starts from a point around about here and wraps around the southern end of the building and part of the way between the boundary of plot 2 and plot 1. And this will be 5 metres in height. Yeah, come back. So it was the noise attenuation fence, sorry. This is a proposed landscaping scheme which we're considering today. As we saw earlier on, these areas around to the periphery of the site around the attenuation area have already been designed as part of the hybrid permission. So it leaves the areas as part of the embankment to be designed as part of this application along the A43. So this is the embankment, and it shows mixed woodland planting with a number of specimen trees in here to give the landscaping schemes some height from day one. And again, the same approach has been shown along the southern boundary. And you've got the existing vegetation along and trees along the southern side of the site, which are retained. Along the Spine Road, you've got a hedgerow planting with sporadic specimen trees along the side here, and some thicket planting as well with some specimen trees along this part of the Spine Road. These are the cross sections of the proposed landscaping. You've got Titfield Lane here with the existing landscaping retained and the embankment to create the levels here. And again, as you move down the Titfield Lane towards the A43, you get different views. So again, Titfield Lane, existing planting, and then the stream and the proposed planting on the embankment and proposed unit 2. Again, the final view, Titfield Lane, then this cross section picks up the attenuation feature here and the planting, and again, unit 2. The next 2 cross sections show the views through the A43. So you've got the A43 located here, the existing planting, then the embankment, and then unit 2 here. And again, the existing planting, the embankment, unit 2. And these here show again cross sections all in the A43 with proposed planting, unit 2 with the service yard here, and the proposed planting, and again A43. So these cross sections, again, this is the cross section of the planting between the 2 units. You've got unit 2, unit 1 with the planting in between. And again, this is the cross section of showing the service yard and the Spine Road, and the chosen level differences between the Spine Road and the service yard. And again, there's another cross section through the Spine Road and the cross section of the planting between the Spine Road and the service yard. So we also have some visuals produced by the applicant, and I'll run through these. So you've got a number of visuals which run in an anti-clockwise direction around the site. And starting with number 1, which is the approach to the site on the A43. And this is the new proposed roundabout with the new warehouse in the background. Again, this is more of a close-up of the same unit, Unit 1 and its car park. This is the view of Unit 1 going along the Spine Road. These buildings here are part of a future development phase, so they have yet to come in as a formal application. And this is the view of Unit 2. As you see, the Spine Road is somewhat elevated against the service yard. And this is a view from the Spine Road through the car park to Unit 2 and the proposed office block shown here. And this is a view of Unit 2 as seen from the attenuation area. And again, another one view from that attenuation area, looking at the Tiffield Road is on your left-hand side here. And this is a view from within the Shire's estate, and this is the display area, and you can see the view just the top of Unit 1 is visible here. And this is a view along the A43 of Unit 1 with the landscaping. This view is taken obviously some years in the future when all that landscaping has reached maturity. And this is the A43. It shows Unit 2, the corner where it's largely built out of the ground. It shows the landscaping at a very early stage in this particular drawing. And as we scroll through, this is at 5 years, and this is at 15 years. So for those who weren't able to make it on the site visit, I've just included some photographs of the site. This is taken from the gateway into the site from Tiffield Lane and looking up the site, and you see the ground level changes. And this is taken probably from around about the highest part of the site. On the left-hand side here, you've got the A43 and Tiffield Lane at the bottom here. And this is looking in the other direction. So you've got the A43 here, and this is the approximate location of where the roundabout will go as part of the development. And finally, this is a view of Tiffield Lane. So this is the development site located here. Written updates for both applications have been circulated, and both applications are recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. At this point, do any members have questions for the officer on both applications? Yes, Councillor Humphreys, please.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Just on the cross sections of plot 2 with the embankment, can you just remind us how high the embankment is?
At the lowest point, at the bottom end of the site, it's around about 8 metres.
Councillor Pritchard, then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Was any consideration given with regards to putting EV panels on the tops of these developments?
There are EV panels on the proposed development, and they cover the base use of the building. So basically, it's the offices, it's the heating, the lighting. It also covers the EV charging for the cars as well. So they're covered by the solar panels on the roof, the photovoltaic panels on the roof.
And also, could you, with regards to Plan DD, could you explain, you know, the height and the embankment that these units will, or the unit, Unit 2 will actually be built upon?
You go back, we want looking to look at the landscaping cross sections.
Yeah, it was the cross sections, DD.
Yeah.
It was Unit 2 when
Yeah,
it was
just
on
trying to-
top of the bank.
Bear with me. Crazy. So we can share the screen.
Perhaps we could come back to that question a bit
Bear
later.
with me, I'm just.
Okay, thank you.
I think they're nearly there.
It was the cross sections through.
Yeah.
labels are hidden by the sharing screen.
It was fairly early on, if I remember, wasn't it?
I think it was the one before that. The middle one.
So this is the cross section of the A43 to the site. So we can zoom in on that.
So the actual development itself.
So
will be-
the existing ground levels is a plus 96. And then the floor level of the building is just below 104. So you're looking at, like I said, about 8 meters.
So in fact, the development itself will be above the trees.
So yeah, I mean, so you're looking at sort of the tree level here, and then the site of the plan is around about sort of like 75% of the way up the trees, yes. But when your perception, for obviously when you look at the car, your perception, then you can see that it will be visually screened by the landscaping. But yeah. So in terms of so yeah, so cross section DD is this point here, and then as you work along, you got, and then so the as you look sort of from the early site, the ground level distances change as you go along the site. So it's the ground level distance is greater at this corner than it is as you go along the site.
Thank you. Councillor Manners, please.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, thank you for your presentation. Could you just as a sort of general outline, just comment on where the full application is in terms of the discharging the conditions from the original approval? And the timescales for that too, please.
We have a series of conditions that need to be approved relating to practical matters such as construction management plans, et cetera, some of those and dealing with the order in which the roundabout and all the other highway works need to be approved, need to be constructed. So we have some conditions, some have been approved, some are still with us, we're working on, and some are still to be submitted. So that we're working through those.
So are the further buildings on this site, are they going to have to come to committee or not?
So yes. So if we go back to, if we look at the,
Yeah, the original site, yeah, because this
so if we go
only
back
covers.
to the original,
So when will those have to come to committee by?
so I think they are either about to be submitted or have already been submitted.
Right. So they need to hit the June deadline.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I've got some further questions, if I may.
Yeah.
Just on the Rhine, I know we're not talking about the bridleway, but my understanding, and I sort of refer to sort of the Greens Norton Parish Council submission earlier this month, which was a very detailed commentary on certain of the conditions. But in that there was a question over the road safety audit for vehicles and the walking, cycling, and horse riding assessment report for non-motorised users, and that isn't on the portal. Should it be?
Sorry, just repeat the question.
It's about there isn't a road safety audit for vehicles, and there isn't a walking, cycling, horse riding assessment report for non-motorised vehicles.
So as part of the 278 works, there's a road safety audit carried out as part of those. So it's part of the, rather than being part of the planning documents, it's part of the highway documents.
Okay. And related to that, particularly on the roundabout, I just want particularly Hayley to be cognizant of the issues that we've got with the A5 Relief Road roundabout going in on the A43 where one lane is blocked. And we really don't want to see another 2-lane highway blockage for 1 year at this junction. I know it's not a matter for today's discussion, but I do want you to note, please, in the minutes that the residents of Towcester, Greens Norton, all the surrounding villages to have that A43 trunk road blocked, or not blocked by, but severely depleted by 50%, would create huge inconvenience for both local and national users. Will that presumably won't come to committee? It'll be dealt with by officers, is that right? And National Highways.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a matter for National Highways. It's their network.
But surely you can influence it.
I can't influence National Highways now. It is like both roads are their network.
But the impact on that by closing would have a severe impact on our network.
I mean, National Highways will look at that when they look to do any sort of work on their network. They do look at how it affects the local network. But that's not something I would personally be involved in. But they would liaise with our highways engineers in regards to any works that were going to affect our network as well.
Okay.
But we would.
Well, I really refer this to Simon then and Nikki. Just please, can you just be aware of the impact that the highways works on the A5, A43 Relief Road are having on the local network, particularly at peak times. And we simply can't do that again when this junction, this roundabout is built. That's what I'd ask. And in terms of the going back to the walking and the motorised, Donkey Lane, is my understanding, is going to be closed for a period of time during these works. And again, that isn't on today, and it's but I believe that may have been approved or not approved. But I'd quite like an update. But again, for Donkey Lane to be closed has a severe impact on Tiffield. And I would quite like to understand what the timings of that are and when that decision will be made.
I mean, I don't have the detail of that at the moment. That will be down to when the developer does the work, and they'll have to, any closures there they'll need a traffic regulation order. But until they start work, we have got, there's lots of things that need to fall into place before we get to that stage.
But the TRO would be directly impacted by the plans they're putting forward now in terms of the layouts. So, you know, it should be taken into account.
There will be some effect on that road, but as to when the closures will be and for how long, I haven't got that detail now.
So when would we have that detail?
Well, it's not relevant to this application at the moment, so
No,
it's not something that
but if you live in Tiffield, that's one of the questions that you have. Anyhow, could I ask you please to take that back? It's a serious consideration or a concern for the residents of Tiffield and Caldicot. And the next question, please. On the lighting, although on page 51, you dismissed 7.39, the points from Greens Norton about the lighting. What concerns me is that if you take the 8 meters on the plateau being developed and then you go up another 21 meters, and then you have 6 meter high lighting, you know, that is going to be seen for miles around. And I just wonder whether we've actually properly evaluated the lighting impact. I mean, for lighting to be at 6 to 8 meters high is really quite high. And we spoke about it on the site visit. And I did note that the Silverstone has been discharged, and it was agreed. That was the lighting that was agreed at the Silverstone Aston Martin plant, which I mentioned at the time, was that lighting is way over the top. That's come from Silverstone Parish Council and a lot of other residents. So what I'm asking is, I really I'm not sure whether we've fully appreciated the height of the lighting in relation to E2. And the other question I've got is that in DEFRA's 2024 Environmental Protection Framework highlights the need for industrial developments to implement dark sky mitigation strategies. And there's no mention of that in your report, Andrew. And so I'm really questioning whether our lighting experts are really fully on board with the location that this is in. It is in a rural location, highly visible from the west. And you haven't done nothing in your report to convince me that that's been properly addressed.
I mean, we have had sort of the requisite expertise look at it from our environmental protection team. And we've had them look at it, and they've assured me that it is acceptable against the E2 regulations that are applicable. And following the comments from Greens Norton Parish Council, I've asked them to look at it again and make sure they're absolutely sure that it's right. And they've again assured me that this is correct.
What's their response to the 2024 Environmental Protection Framework?
I haven't asked them that particular question.
Well, that was in the notes from Greens Norton.
But it's again, I've asked them to look at those Greens Norton comments and asked them, and they assure me that that is still
Have they been to the site?
I don't know that. Well,
they should be. They should go. I mean, we cannot have our own experts giving opinions on sites of such magnitude, because it's only when you really go to see the site, as you kindly walked us around last week, that you actually see the extent and of the structures.
Apologies, I'm just looking through the lighting because there was reference to on each of the examples of the types of lighting that they're using to that dark sky. So that is referenced in the lighting assessment submitted, so that has been considered.
Where was that, please? Which page?
It's not on the committee report, it's actually in the lighting report that's
well, that doesn't help me desperately, does it?
Environmental. No, I'm just clarifying that point
you
for
know,
you now, Councillor.
It doesn't give me confidence that if you take the heights of these buildings, that we've properly assessed this. And in terms of the other point that I thought was very pertinent, apart from a number of others in the report by Andrew Foss at Greens Norton, was the question of the planting. That he spotted that there was a lot of the planting was hazel and hawthorn. Well, hazel and hawthorn really doesn't grow more than 2 to 3 meters, and that trees such as willow, silver birch, and other trees weren't mentioned in the landscaping report. So, I mean, can you confirm what tree species you talked about? Specimen trees, Andrew. But have we actually got the right height of trees going in on the landscaping? Rather than the committee spending lots of time on this, what I would ask is that this is minuted and we go back to those discussions and just check that actually we are putting in absolutely the right height of trees, because the visual impact will be huge.
So if you look at this sort of area here, which is sort of typical of some of the tree planting that's just been proposed, and you look again at what's been proposed, it's field maple, hornbeam, hazel, hawthorn, holly, privet, cherry, blackthorn, Scots pine, white willow, common lime. And the extra heavy trees which are the sort of the really ones which have the most impact because they're semi-mature, they're sort of 18, 20 centimeters stem girth. Again, but these ones are sort of expressed in Latin, and I'm not entirely sure what species they are, but our landscape consultant has looked at these and said that they are appropriate.
And again, Andrew, what I'd ask is, has that landscape consultant got out of his desk or home office and gone and seen the site?
As far as I know, yes, but I couldn't absolutely confirm that.
Well, I think that should be confirmed.
Yeah.
It's our internal officer that's landscape officer, and I do know that he does go out on site when we consult him on planning applications.
Or could you confirm back to me that he actually went to that site, Nikki, please?
Not without him being here or. let
No,
him
but
advise
after
us
this
as-
meeting,
as-
after this
I will
meeting.
do,
Yeah,
yes.
please.
Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, some of those tree species you mentioned, Andrew, they really won't do very much. They go to 2 to 3 meters high. When this is going up to 24, 28 meters, it'll have no impact at all. Thank you.
Councillor Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Probably because I've been on the committee too long, but having said that, looking at my colleagues, most of them weren't there when the original application came up. Could you please confirm that when the original application came up, it did include massive great BA warehouses? You can imagine that my concerns with regards to, should we say, other AL scenarios, that when you look at the amount of industrial and BA warehousing, when you look at this particular, and then you've got one and two, and then you've got the other locations there. What was originally approved at the outline application?
Thank you. I'm sure Andrew will show you the data that's actually on his first slide. I think it was what was approved in terms of size. Is that true, Andrew?
So this is the parameters plan, which shows what the parameters that should fall within. So this is a fundamental part of the outline planning permission, and shows how the application should progress through its stages. So this is the outline, and it gives the parameters, how big the buildings are, the unit sizes, how many units there can be, what the finished floor levels can be, what the heights can be, and then you had alongside that, when it's submitted, indicative master plans. We had two indicative master plans, one which had 1 unit here, and another one which had 2 units on this area here. So both of those were indicative master plans, were showing how the development was likely to come forward, and both those master plans form part of the presentation when this originally went to committee. But that's before WNC days. It was back in the old South Northamptonshire Council days.
Were they all classified as B8 and B2?
So the site is B8, but at least 7.4 hectares has to come forward as either B2 or B1. So it's a mixed use on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Any more before we move on? All right, thank you, members. So that concludes the initial part of this meeting. We will now consider each of the application in their own right. So we're now considering the 5009, which I believe is plot 1. I'll call upon speakers to come forward. So on my list, I invite Louise Croft to come forward and have 5 minutes at the front. Thank you.
You hear me
Wait.
all right?
Yeah, just make sure you're close to it. So when you start, I'll do the 5 minutes for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here from Save Toaster now, which objects to this application and seeks your refusal on the 5009. Paragraph 44 of the June 22 decision notice set out maximum heights for Zone 3 to not exceed 15.5 metres or 127.5 AOD. And yes, that may be the case now, but these parameter measurements are maximums. They are not targets. At Panettone Park, for example, 22 metres and 19 metres was given, and the end build out was for 18 and 15 and a half. You should consider them like a speed limit. You don't drive at 70 miles an hour if it's dense fog. You adapt to the conditions, and that is what we ask you to do today. Unit 1 proposes a single warehouse that will operate 24/7, does not include any strategic landscaping, and is 127.4 AOD. But given the AOD at Donkey Lane, Tiffield Lane, is 97 metres, this effectively means that this building towers 30.46 metres above Donkey Lane. For mass, it is 153 metres long and 91.3 metres deep, giving a 15,000 square metre footprint. By anyone's measure, it is a very large-scale building that will inevitably cause unacceptable visual impact on the locality. The planning officer seriously recommends you approve it and disregard its large size because the potential economic benefits outweigh the wider visual harms. We trust you will not be so easily persuaded. The visual harm contradicts policies S10, SS2, BN5, NE2, the National Planning Policy Framework, paras 135 A, B, C and D, paragraph 139, and paragraph 187B of the NPPF. You have these policy references to refuse this application for these masses and scales. Please use them. Plus, the ongoing DHL inquiry is currently taking an in-depth study to the visual impact for the adjoining development plot of equal size proposing units of similar AOD, scale and mass. The conclusion of that independent review by the planning inspector must be relevant to this debate and surely should have primacy. Why do you not wait until that inquiry has been concluded? Vision. What is IM's clear vision as required by the NPPF 123? The applicant has maxed out the construction parameters to allow them as much flexibility as possible for B8, rather than meet a development that is appropriately considered to meet the local plan's requirements and toasters. It is proceeding to apply for full consent, knowing and taking for granted that the planning inspector will extinguish SB 32. That may not happen. It seems the developer wants this at any cost to local people. You must protect us now. Traffic is still applicable. We believe there are two significant developments that have occurred since the applicant last presented traffic modelling. One, the approval and current construction of the SEND school, plus expansion of the Gateway School at St John's Tiffield, which requires an elongated route via the Tove and will be via the new Hulcut roundabout, and the expansion of the warehouse provision at Northampton Gateway. We know from interaction with National Highways that neither has been factored into IM's traffic modelling. Please ask them what the impacts will be. If they don't know, you cannot give consent. Please also reject this on cases of sustainability and non-motorised user access to the site. There is no controlled safe crossing point at the northern end of Northampton Road, and no account has been taken of the current and future need of horse riders, with the proposed extinguishment of SB 32 and the impact on Bridleway RK2. The bus service is limited, and there's nothing in the application which talks to sustainable access to the site from the SUE, from pedestrians and cyclists. Please, you have the policies here to refuse it. Please apply them, or at the very least, wait until the DHL appeal is determined to provide clarity to your dilemma. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Croft. You stay there. Is there any questions from members to you? No? Okay, you can return to your seat. Thank you. I now call upon Charles Askew, a local resident, to come forward, please.
Good afternoon. I am a member of Toaster Town Council and of Save Toaster Now, but I represent myself in this matter and not specifically their views. Firstly, noise.
Can you bring the microphone a little bit
Sorry.
closer to you?
Firstly, noise. My understanding of the documents is noise has been determined by considering B2 use, which I can understand because B2 generates more noise in and around the building. My concern is that this doesn't deal with all of the vehicle movements you get from B8 use, specifically vehicles reversing. And as you've seen, the yard from from these buildings is potentially quite raised. And at night, the noise coming from B8 reversing in those yards may have been significantly underplayed. I would suggest, and this is a suggestion, that you consider requesting that all the reversing beepers from the HGVs which are owned or controlled by the occupants of these buildings be made white noise, as has been requested in another local planning inquiry recently. One of the other main points I'd like to make is of the colour scheme. Now, I understand the colour scheme has to be gradated, if that's the right word, and that seems sensible. But using shades of what I would describe battleship grey seems to be entirely appropriate for trying to hide these buildings if we were at sea. But we're not at sea. We're in a rural landscape where the majority of colours are browns and greens. The application or the colour scheme which DHL had put forwards was of brown at the bottom, green in the middle, and what I would call grey at the top. And despite all the other issues that one might have with their applications, it seemed to try and blend in with the landscape much better than just greys. It doesn't demonstrate compatibility and integration with its surroundings, basically, and that's what's required from policy SS2, the local plan. As we've seen from some of the cross sections quite easily, that the proposed landscaping really does not screen these buildings. They will be quite visible. And one specific point I'd like to make is that in the visuals we saw earlier, specifically from the Shire's play area, we saw play equipment in the foreground, and on the right-hand side, we could see the top of plot 1. Plot 2 was conspicuous. It is the same height. It was conspicuous in its absence. And when I've reviewed the red line LVIA of the same view, you can see plot 2 and plot 1. So I would potentially ask you, if you can, to go back to that and check for yourselves, because I believe that plot 1 is missing from that image. Those were the main points I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Okay, if you want to remain seated for a second. Anybody got a question? Okay, thank you. You can return to your seat. Thank you for your input. There being no other objector to speak, I invite the applicant, David Smith, to come forward with his colleague, Daniel Butler, who's going to provide any technical assistance he may require but won't be presenting.
Excuse me, Chair.
That's on the
Excuse me.
second. Yes, but that's the second. We're considering plot 1. I believe that whoever's shouting is actually plot 2, which is the second consideration. According to mine, settle down, gentlemen, we'll sort this out. Fine. Well, in your running order, it says item agenda 6. We're on item agenda 5. Happening. Sorry about this. We do have a remote speaker for the second application, so I think she's thinking she's been excluded, but not. Happy? Sorry, gentlemen. When you're ready, your 5 minutes will begin. Thank you. Hang on, you've turned it off as opposed to bring it down towards you. Not yet, but press it once. Try the other one. Apologies. Press that one. Good, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is David Smith and I'm speaking today as the Director of Planning and Communities at IM Properties, and I'm joined by my colleague and Project Director, Daniel Butler. These applications represent the culmination of nearly a decade's work and collaboration between various parties from the plan making stage to determination of the hybrid planning application in June 2022. We've continued to work carefully and closely with your planning officers and both highway authorities and other stakeholders to agree the necessary detail that, subject to the discussion today, will allow us to move forward and realise the allocation AL3. We appreciate the strength of local feeling. I've personally invested in conversations with a wide range of stakeholders through the last 10 years, and I can understand the concerns that sit behind some of the comments raised. However, Towcester is changing, and in bringing this scheme forward, we have worked really hard to minimise the impact of the development at this allocated site, to respect the character of the local area in our approach to design, and to help to integrate the scale and mass associated with these proposed modern employment buildings with their surroundings. Importantly, these applications fully accord with the hybrid planning permission that members approved in 22 and key parameters of maximum building heights and sizes, as well as including a requirement for our small unit scheme to be known Kickstart. Members will have noted a recent update to Council which assures we sit squarely within those maximum development parameters previously approved by the Council and accepted as appropriate. For those reasons, I will not focus my remarks on the principle of development today, which has already been firmly established. However, firstly, subject to legal agreements and programming discussions with highways authorities, we stand ready to commence construction of the new roundabout at the A43 Holcott Turn. These reserve matters applications represent a key part of the development jigsaw for this site, and their approval will give us additional confidence to proceed. This stretch of the A43, including the dangerous junction at St John's Turn, has seen too many fatal collisions over the years. The construction of the new roundabout and the to-be-adopted spine road through the site will provide a safer access for drivers onto and off the A43 and is a real benefit of this scheme. Secondly, economic growth. West Northamptonshire is forecast to need almost 40,000 new jobs by 2041. Towcester Park, when fully completed, will create approximately 1,600 new jobs, with net 980 additional jobs estimated to be filled by the residents of Towcester and West Northants. These jobs will require a mix of experience and qualifications, and we anticipate 40% of these roles being in managerial, professional and technical positions, in addition to entry-level roles. Sources of labour will include those currently furthest from the employment market, those looking to return to employment, those looking for new opportunities, or indeed from the 2,900 additional working age residents derived from the substantial housing growth that is occurring in Towcester. As I say, Towcester is changing. IM Properties has started the conversation with local agencies, training providers and schools in Towcester and the surrounding areas to explore opportunities relating to employment, skills, learning for adults and young people, and we are committed to maximising the benefits of this project. Our plan will be submitted to the Council in April. Thirdly, design quality. By according with the approved development parameters and working with the site levels and existing and significant additional landscape screening, including trees at day 1, 6 to 7 metres, we have sought to minimise the impact of development and achieve a solution that balances the requirements of multiple stakeholders. Working closely with your officers, our aim has always been to deliver a high-quality, landscape-led commercial development that meets the future employment needs of West Northamptonshire.
1 minute to go.
Finally, we understand the importance of integrating with the local community and responding to their legitimate concerns about construction management. That's why we've established the Community Liaison Group, including a variety of local stakeholders. This group will meet throughout the construction phase to ensure effective communication and to minimise inconvenience. In conclusion, we believe that these reserved matters applications represent a well-considered and high-quality development for Towcester and West Northants. They align with the approved hybrid permission. They address key economic and infrastructure needs, requirements of the policy, and offer significant benefits. Should you agree with the officer's recommendation to approve, Iron Properties is ready to move forward this development after nearly 10 years of conversations. We will continue to respectfully engage with the local people and communities to understand and respond to their needs and concerns.
That's your 5 minutes,
Thank you
sir.
for your time.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr Smith? Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Presumably when you talk about 1,600 employment opportunities, presumably that's 1 and 2, is it?
Correct. I should have made that clear.
And also, how do you get to the figure of 960 local employees from Towcester? Because quite frankly, when you look at DHL, when you look at Northampton Gateway, how the heck are you going to get 900 creative employment opportunities?
To clarify, that's across Towcester and West Northants. It's not exclusively only for residents of Towcester. We're saying it's Towcester.
Well, you said earlier it was 960 from Towcester.
And West Northants. I can check the notes. If I didn't, that's an apology and an oversight on my behalf. It should have been Towcester and West Northants.
Okay.
Any more questions? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thank you, Mr Chairman. Question, Mr Smith, if I may. Thank you for the opportunity to understand your views on the 10 years of negotiations or conversations you've had with the local community. You mentioned earlier on that you respect the local area, and in terms of the design that you currently have, that we have here today, are you aware of anything of this nature anywhere in the Towcester area? Because frankly, the size is huge on both plots.
You obviously have Pineham, which is in the was the South Northants and now the West Northants geography, which has a variety of buildings. But there are other proposals, obviously, over the road, the DHL scheme, which is being promoted as well for buildings of a similar scale. I think the question is probably, is the impact acceptable, notwithstanding the scale of the buildings? And our assessment and the council's own officers' assessment is that the impacts are acceptable. So I think we turn the question on its head. Not how big is it? It sounds significant, it's substantial, it's horrific, whichever words people want to use. Is the impact of the development acceptable? And that's the conclusion that the council's officers, our team, and the planning officer has reached.
So in terms of the application, you have something of the region of about 30.46 metres above Donkey Lane was an indication that was given out earlier on. Many of the illustrations we saw by our office earlier on today gave us the absolute clear view that we could still see all the buildings of huge mass even after 15 years of screening. 15 years of tree screening that you've recommended still shows, so effectively that screening fails. It shows quite clearly the buildings that you're proposing. Another question I've got also is in terms of non-car users, access to the site, because effectively there are no links and safe links across the road. What are you proposing?
So access, transport and movement has been embedded in the scheme from day one in terms of getting employees from the scheme to Towcester and beyond, to the residential communities and beyond. So the scheme obviously includes the controlled crossing point over the A43 as part of the new roundabout improvement, which is a much, much safer route to take to cross from Tiffield Lane, Donkey Lane into the heart of Towcester. Beyond cycling and walking, which is embedded in the scheme, is obviously a bus service requirement, which is subject to separate provisions in the 106 that goes with the hybrid planning permission. We have an obligation to deliver a sustainable bus service. That conversation is started with the county council, or rather the Highways Authority, as is now, to ensure, and the operators, to ensure that we can deliver the best possible service that we can, recognising that when we finally get to an occupation, should the committee be minded to support this and we actually get to site, that it's several years away from a building actually being occupied. So we keep the conversation going with the transport providers and the council, so that we understand how things are changing and therefore how we can respond at the point in time that we have an occupier ready for the first building on site.
And my last question, Mr. Chairman, you talk about the future, and currently we have vast buildings occupied by robots not too far away from us. So 1,600 jobs turn themselves around to perhaps being 160 jobs quite quickly in the world of automation. I'd like your view on that, on the basis that you don't have currently an occupier for your plans.
You don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
Well, I'm happy to take that one.
Well, this is the future, not.
It is the future, but it's a source of much continued speculation around the impact of automation. And there is evidence that automation creates more jobs than it displaces in terms of the volume of goods being produced and moved through a building. It also creates a more diverse range of skills required. So there are pros to automation as much as there may be concerns about it. We should remember this scheme will deliver a mix of uses. We have 30% up to, in fact, sorry, at least 30% of the scheme will be light industrial or manufacturing. Then we have a good proportion of the scheme which will be small to medium-sized buildings. I mentioned Kickstart, which we're going to launch marketing the scheme. So it's not an exclusive logistics development. Yes, it includes a larger building, a larger footprint building, but I think it's recognised by ourselves that's attractive to the market. And of course, we want something that's attractive to market to underpin some of the significant costs that are in the infrastructure works as well, which was acknowledged by the council when they were allocating the site. So yeah, automation, you can see it different ways.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Councillor Humphreys, please.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your presentation. You will have heard the speaker from Save Toaster Now comment that your traffic modelling preceded the construction of the new Sen School and the Northampton Gateway.
Excuse me, we're not discussing successive traffic. That's nothing to do with this application in front of you.
Well, I was just seeking a
I'll refer
comment
to the-
on that, but yeah, I appreciate it's.
Well, it's not.
It's something I wanted to raise, which was raised by one of the speakers. So if I'm permitted.
Well,
I
I'm
would
just saying, we decided before this meeting. Sorry, I'll go to Simon for that one. Sorry, Nikki.
I can just come in, Chair. I mean, this development will have been required to mitigate itself at the stage of outline approval. Those subsequent developments, such as Tiffield School, similarly will have mitigated their own impacts. So notwithstanding that they followed on from this outline consent, they in themselves will have been required to mitigate their own impacts in respect to those developments, such that there would be nil detriment or not severe detriment.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, Councillor Manners, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, for your presentation. When it comes to the bridleway and the footpaths and public access, did you consider other options such as a walkway over the A43?
We're not considering the bridleway. It's as part of a separate application.
I'm really trying.
But this application is not dependent upon that bridleway.
Well, it links into the options that are going to be available.
Well, Nikki.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again, Councillor?
Well, I just want to know the history of what was considered for the bridleway and the other footpaths to the northern end of the site.
But it's
and the linking of those and potential alleviation.
It's formally been agreed.
Well, it seems to be sort of written roughshod is how I read in the papers, and I'm not sure if it's been properly addressed.
Yeah, I mean, the stopping up or a diversion does come under a separate process. The applicants will have considered their option. They've,
I'd quite like to hear from the applicant.
do you want to direct your question to, you happy to?
Yeah.
So the question is, what options did we consider in the early stages? Just briefly, that it's evidence based. So early days, there was both the WHR, which was referred to in a previous exchange, which looks at the impacts of the development on highway safety and users of the network in its widest sense. The evidence and the survey counts that were undertaken around the use of some of the existing routes in the vicinity of the site, the bridleway in particular, which the evidence demonstrates at best it was sparse use of that existing bridleway. In fact, nil use recorded on the 10 days that the survey work was undertaken.
No one in their right mind was going to cross the A43 on a horse. Maybe 50 years ago, you could have done, and that's really the point, was to actually try and help that for the future. And this development could have provided the impetus to do that.
So it responds by providing the footpath cycleway from Tiffywood Lane, Donkey Lane, through the site, over the safe crossing combined in the roundabout and down Northampton Road, with provisions obviously on Northampton Road as well, to make that a better and safer route to pass. So there were a number of options considered. I'm not sure I need to go into too much detail from that.
No, I mean, the Secretary of State at the end of the day will decide whether what you decided was a good plan, and it's out of our hands. Yes, thank you, gentlemen. So, Andrew, have you got any comebacks on what you've heard in the discussion from the public speakers, please?
Yeah, just on terms of the parameters, I mean, as I said in the presentation, the heights of the buildings have now been changed since the report was written, so they now do fully sit within the approved parameters of the building. In terms of white noise, yes, if members see fit to add a condition relating to white noise, then I think that's something which would be fine. It would do to pass the tests. I don't see a particular issue with that. In terms of landscaping, the landscaping will not screen the buildings. I think the most the landscaping you do is soften the buildings and help them harmonise with the environment. Considering the size of the buildings, expecting the landscaping to screen them is unrealistic, and that just can't happen with the buildings that are being proposed. With regard to cycling to and from the site, again, as has been said, we are trying to encourage people from Towcester to cycle to the site, and there is a new cycle route being created along Northampton Road. It's dedicated so people are not cycling on the road. It's a dedicated cycleway, and that then goes across the pedestrian crossings, across the roundabout and into the site. So we are doing what we can to encourage walking and cycling for people who are employed from Towcester to get to the site by other means other than the car. In terms of the colours, I think it's trying to get the right colours for the right site. I think one of the things that came out of the landscape and visual impact assessment for this site is a lot of the visual impact for this site is quite localised. You see it most from Tiffywood Lane and from the A43. And in those locations, you're looking up at the buildings, and therefore to sort of give it more of a light grey, to sort of blend it with the sky rather than more earthy colours was thought to be the right approach. But obviously members may have a different view on that, and I'll leave that for you to discuss. Thank you.
Nikki, do you want to add?
Yeah, it was just to reiterate that obviously we are dealing with a site that is allocated under the local plan. It's a site, as members will have seen when they were on site, that you've got significant levels difference on site. So there's inevitably going to be an extent of cut and fill within the site and plateaus that have to be made. And it's a balancing exercise of working with the site that you've got and also avoiding extra earth movements to and from the site, increased traffic. So it is very much a balancing act of working with a site that's been allocated and the physical constraints of that site. And I just want to reiterate that point. Thank you, Chair.
Right, members, we're now at the point of open debate on 5009. Remember, that's plot 1 at the top. It's not plot 2 down the bottom, which is towering above Donkey Lane.
Ask one question,
Please,
please,
yeah.
of Nikki, Chair. We did speak at the site meeting about the difference in opinions between the CPRE carbon offsetting and the developers, and to try and have an independent view in terms of the complexity of those calculations. And I wondered, Nikki, whether you had anything to report to the committee.
Yeah, I mean, we've had internal discussion. I mean, it's not something that we would seek an independent view of. We've got, in terms of policy requirements, we've got policy S11 and S10 within the joint core strategy, and we've kind of reviewed that subsequently. And the emphasis is more on BREEAM. It does talk about climate change and kind of trying to reduce carbon emissions, etc. The emphasis is more on building designs and how they can achieve climate reduction in terms of construction and building methods. So that's where that comes into it. I think we did also mention on site that there's an acceptance, as I've just inferred, about kind of there's inevitably going to be as a result of development carbon emissions from any development, and it's about how you mitigate those. This is in terms, as I say, of a balance of trying to keep earth movements within the site. It's not cost effective for a developer to have significant earth movements off the site. So it's unreasonable to expect that they try and retain as much earth movements on the site. We also mentioned about, in terms of other carbon offsetting, they've kind of gone one step further recently they were required to achieve BREEAM good, very, very good, apologies, as per the outline, and they've actually revisited that with their building designs and technology, and they're seeking to achieve BREEAM excellence now. So it's a balancing exercise in terms of the impacts of construction that you will inevitably get and what you can achieve to mitigate and offset that.
Thank you, Nikki. Who wants to open the debate? Yes, Councillor Gonzalez-Savage, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm concerned about the size and the mass of the proposal before us today. It's clearly not an industrial site. It doesn't border a motorway, and it's entirely out of character for Towcester. The significant visual detriment, I think, which is quite major from that point of view, mustn't overlook that, is addressed in a very mild form with a screening. And I hear Nikki's points about the screening that would never entirely deal with a building of this nature. And this is my concern: why is there a building of this nature being proposed at all? Is it that the fact that the developers are trying to maximise their value out of the site? It does sound that way. And one would strongly think that they would work with the local area to try and find character development buildings that would blend in with the local area and certainly be of a better aspect. So I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, about the mass of the proposal before us.
Yes, thank you for that. Obviously, the developers are exercising their right as given to them back in June 2022 of what they can build. And much as that was determined at that time, if we as a committee had wanted to do something different, that was the time to have done it, I guess, not now. And we couldn't be seen as a form of objection we wanted to. I certainly wouldn't be supported on my left if such was suggested, to be honest. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, my colleague, with regards to the height and size of these developments, I appreciate that it started off as an employment site, and also it seems very familiar indeed with AL1, AL2, AL4 and AL5. And it seems to be that, you know, we're not, well, we are the distribution centre of the UK. But having said that, I'm very concerned indeed, but the amount of distribution warehouses that are being put in this particular area, I appreciate it was in the local plan. I appreciate it was an employment site, but once again, you know, it's a B8 warehousing situation. But you know, but the problem is one of these things actually is that you get to a stage where, as it's already been approved outline, it's very difficult indeed, other than perhaps making some alterations to the requirements that otherwise, you know, I'm afraid it has to go ahead.
His history will show that AL3 was the first we considered and was allowed within under the parameters that were there. Subsequent to that, an SPD, or whatever you call it, was subsequent to that, which had tried to address what has happened with this site, but there's no going back.
No, it's one of these things where we think of the SPD, it really is, you know, an absolute waste of space, spending lots of money on an SPD. But having said that, as you quite rightly say, this was actually given the approval prior to the SPD.
And it is a combination of B2 and B8. It's not purely B8.
Yeah.
There is a,
well,
which
there's not going to be
in the original plan
there's not going to be much B2 there, but it's going to be an enormous amount of B8.
But in the original local plan part 2, which called for different percentages, this does meet that requirement.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Manners, please.
Thank you, Chair. I simply can't agree with Mr. Smith's comment earlier that it's a landscape-led development. This is not a landscape-led development. We gave approval, admittedly, much against my better judgment in June 22 for the hybrid application. But this application doesn't go anywhere near to mitigate the size. And I'm not against the principle of the development. That was part of the allocated plan. But I mean, the way that the development has been proposed, so higher at the end of Donkey Lane, with the noise, the light, lack of mitigation, I cannot support this development. I think the developers, there are too many questions on those issues that haven't been properly addressed. And I think they should go back and redraw those and come back to the committee with them.
Any more comments? Councillor James, we haven't heard from you today. No, you are right. Councillor Parker then, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand what the councillors and members of the public have said, but I think we're drifting back sometimes to the original where permissions have been agreed. And I think, as Nikki pointed out, it was an allocated site. AL3 was agreed in 2022, and that was, if I remember rightly, it's because the local plan part 2 did not define the height of buildings in that plan, if I remember rightly. But as chair, I don't know if you could correct me if I'm wrong there, but the SPDs cover the 2 other areas. There was no SPD for AL3. That's why it went through. So the height is a height, it's maxed up to that, which planners or anyone else are entitled to do so. So I can't see reasons, planning reasons, to turn this application down, Chair.
Thank you. Was that a proposal, Councillor Parker? Oh, sorry, who am I missing? Sorry, Councillor Humphries, sorry, apologise.
Sorry, I was simply going to comment. I agree entirely with Councillor Parker. You know, regrettably, there don't seem to be any planning reasons. It's all been set in stone pretty much already by the Hybrid Planning Permission. Thank you.
So sorry, back to you, councillor Parker.
Yeah, I was going to say happy. I'm not sure I'm happy, but I would propose we accept officer's advice and agree this application.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? I'll come to that in a sec. The bit that came out was the white noise bit, councillor Parker. I still
Yeah.
think is relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with that. I mean, if that can be added in, then I would absolutely support that.
Before we move further, is there any other conditions that we think are relevant? Thank you. Councillor Manners.
Yeah, I would ask that the lighting is reappraised. I would ask that the planting is reappraised. I'm listening to the sort of mood music. And I also think that Mr. Askew's comments on the colour scheme, the banding, were also appropriate. So, I mean, as I said, I just don't think there's enough detail in here to mitigate the impact of these buildings. And I accept that you can't hide a building that high. I get that, unless we're going to put some huge Scots pines or the redwoods in and wait 150 years. But so I do accept that, but I just don't think they've gone far enough. And I wondered whether we can have those discussions subsequently with the developer if this is regrettably approved.
Okay, I'll consult my left-hand side. I believe we're waiting on four things: white noise, colour banding, plantation and lighting. Would that be fair?
Okay, Chair, we think we can add
Thank you, Simon.
the white noise condition. That was already accepted. On the lighting, we can seek a validation report to make sure that the lighting that's developed is in accordance with the spillage pattern that's shown in the lighting assessment. And if that's not, we can put a condition on, say it might need to be adjusted at a later date. So we're approving the lighting as set out, with the spillage assessment that's already been done, with a validation report to make sure that it does what it says on the tin. And if it doesn't, then it might need to be adjusted, and you can do that through condition. And on the banding, I think we can change the colour banding through condition, but I think it would be in interest of members to steer what sort of colouring they want, because obviously that's a condition that we'd have to take away. But the banding is as proposed. And the landscaping, we can look at the mix of landscaping and do a further reserve detailed planting schemes and have another look at it for an extra condition that we've further reserved as a result of this decision today.
Thank you, Simon. And to repeat, please, could the people who are involved in those discussions visit the site?
Yeah, we'll make sure that we properly assess that with all the expertise that we need on those extra conditions.
So considering the banding, what are the views around the table on banding? I could understand to point the light banding when you're near it looking up, but if you're at a distance, then you end up with white banding amongst a green scenario.
Chair.
So I know the Panatoni Park, which sits in a valley, is hideous because it's all light colours and it's dark around it and you can see it from outer space. I don't know anything else.
In that
Yes,
case,
sorry, Councillor Parker.
I'll withdraw what I was about to say if it's hideous. But looking at lots of other BA sites, they go from sort of a dark blue to a light blue in 4 different colours. I don't know if that was considered, or if that's not suitable for this area.
That's similar to the ones down at junction 14 in the M1 with the John Lewis ones, but they stick out hideously to my way of thinking. And you've got to remember that the surrounding area is green. We're in the green and verdant land around there, and sticking a blue building, I think, would look. That's just my personal opinion, but I'm looking for more input. Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, Just a point in terms of that, as the building itself, the key size building is so enormous, whether or not it's in favour, does the banding have to be the same all the way across the building? Is there not an opportunity therefore to try and break it up, as in break up the mass of the size? Opportunities.
Through you, Chair. I mean, it's whether we look at kind of more earthy tones, and I'm kind of glancing a little bit across to the applicants, kind of earthy tones at ground level, but still fading to the kind of lighter tones as you reach to the sky.
I think we definitely believe it needs to fade upwards, getting lighter. But I think, as you're quite right, you just pointed out, Nicky, that nearer the ground level, it should encompass the ground level a bit more. Or greeny brown, light greeny browns near the bottom, then fading out towards the top, maybe. Is that, sorry, Councillor James, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. We did have, well, must be a couple of years ago now, we dealt with an application for a very sizable warehouse at Daventry. And one of the main colours was green, I know that. And I think you and I went on the site visit to that. And that fitted in with the rural backdrop looking towards from Daventry to Braunston.
That faded from green, lighter going up, didn't it?
That's right.
And it was very much in keeping with the surround.
That might be more appropriate, but I think as far as matters of colours are concerned, I learned this the hard way. You have to listen to an architect, not a surveyor, on colours. And the art background.
Yeah. Right, are we happy with that, officers? Sorry.
So if we can, we've got just to confirm, we've got the white noise condition, the requirement to validate the lighting, and then if we seek delegated powers through approval through yourself, Chair, for looking at the landscaping and additional species as appropriate, and also looking at the colour banding, moving from earthy tones, for instance, to a greyer tone.
Okay. Thank you for writing that.
Okay.
So back to Councillor Parker. Are you happy to propose this given those 4 conditions?
Yeah, happy to still propose that with those conditions attached.
So I have a seconder for that. Councillor James. So is there any more discussion before I put this to a vote? Right, those in favour of accepting the officer's decision with the proviso. Sorry, Bob, did you want to say something? So you're a bit early with the vote. With the proviso of 4 we've spoken about, agree, please show accordingly. That's 1, 2, 3. So 8. Those against? 2. That motion is carried. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to item 5054, which is plot 2, given the same presentation we had from at the front. So at this point, we'll move into speaker question time. So reasonable. So I'd invite Louise Croft again to come forward and talk about plot 2, which is the larger of the 2, which is adjacent to Donkey Lane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. When you start, then I'll start this.
So again, Safe Toaster now seeks your refusal of this particular application. The maximum height for the building, according to the decision notice, was 21 metres or 125 metres AOD. And this unit is 124 metres AOD and sits 28.4 metres above Donkey Lane. But I think what's really concerning about this building is that it is 341.5 metres wide and 118.4 metres deep. It is by any stretch of the imagination colossal. How can this possibly be safeguarding visual amenity as per policy SS2? It is a classic example of the developer pushing the boundaries to the absolute limit in order to secure maximum height and floor plan dimensions, regardless of suitability. Mr. Smith claims that he respects the local character, but not with applications like this, Mr. Smith. The impact is completely unacceptable. Toaster is changing. If this goes ahead, it will be for the worst. It has severe visual impact. Para 712 of the Planning Officer's report acknowledges that this is regard to Tiffield Lane. It is inevitable that the buildings will dominate the eastern side of the lane and fundamentally change the rural character. So that is what we are looking at, fundamentally changing Toaster's rural character. So again, all those policies that I quoted earlier will apply to the visual impact of this particular application. Why aren't you waiting for the DHL inquiry to be concluded? It's still running. We haven't had closing statements yet. It's really important because visual impact will be set out by the planning inspector at the end of it. The visual impact assessor for WNC said that for applications of this scale, you should have a 7.5 metre scope for assessing. This was only done on 3 metres. So we need to get this planning visual impact policy sorted out, and the DHL appeal will do that for us. So we say that we can't go back on what's been done, but we could with the planning inspector's decision making. It will have primacy. Again, coming to vision, please ask the applicant what the vision is for the site. It looks like it's 100% B8 at this particular point, given that we're looking at 74 loading bays for HGVs and 104 HGV parking spaces, all spilling out onto the A43 and the strategic road network. Where is the integrated, coordinated and comprehensive planning approach as required by policy AL3? It is a completely inappropriate scale and mass that has been indulged by planners with absolutely no regard to the suitability of the location. Hence the hastily removed exceedance of 25 centimetres after the issue of the officer's report. That was very odd indeed. I'm going again to traffic. This has a 2021 opening year. Again, absurd. It should be following the paragraph 116 of the MPPF about cumulative impacts. The planning officer stated in 2021 that mitigation works from the other AL developments can provide the mitigation required for the SRN. As such, there's no reason to withhold planning permission for the application. But we know from the DHL inquiry that that assumption is absolutely incorrect. No other AL development sites will mitigate 20 to 31 cumulative models, and there is no plan in place for strategic mitigation that is known to be necessary. So if we're down to looking at conditions, I think that we should definitely say that a condition should be that SB 32, the bridleway, should remain in place, and that this particular section of the site is redesigned with smaller and medium-sized units with SB 32 running through it, over to the A43 with a bridge for multi-users, cyclists, horse riders, pedestrians, into the back of the residential area of the Shires, so that you have a proper, sustainable, safe route to connect from SB1 in the north right through to RK3 in the south and to the southern urban extension. That is entirely possible. Why hasn't the developer suggested it? It should have always been there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, questions that you may have? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, Ms. Crofts. Thank you for your notes and views on the development proposals today. Have you met with the developer out of interest?
Oh, yes, we have on 3 or 4 occasions. They've run different seminars in Toaster, and we have met with them. We've expressed these views, but they have completely disregarded them.
So they haven't come back on any of the points that you've raised
No.
today. Thank you very much.
Any more questions, members? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Now we can bring in, I believe, Wendy Banner, who's sat patiently in the background for her submission, I believe, if technology allows.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, yes, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee. Apologies for not being present. I'm on site visits today. I'm here representing views that Claire Marshall, our volunteer, has presented, and with contributions from BHS, but also from the West Northants Local Access Forum. Both organisations object to these proposed plans that will effectively extinguish public bridleway SB 32. Planning approval shouldn't be granted until the future of public bridleway SB 32, which passes under Plot 2, is determined. Reduced usage that was referred to of the bridleway is purely down to the lack of the safe crossing, which has been referred to. But moving on, if a formal crossing was available, we do believe this would be a popular route linking the shires and the local villages. The network locally is very fragmented. Equestrians and cyclists only have access to 22% of rights of way nationally. The proposed alternative route here is not a formal diversion that will be adopted by highways and remain under the protection of the Highways Act 1980. Therefore, there's no mitigation offered by this plan that is being scrutinised today. Pro users will have to travel considerably further to access the RK3 footpath, and this will be inconvenient and possibly difficult for disabled users. The bridleways SB52 and RK2 nearby will also be impacted. There will be limited current, the limited current ability to cross the A43 will be impossible then for equestrians and for disabled users. Safe access to 3 further bridleways will be further compromised. Safe access and road safety are fundamental in any new development under the MPPF, which applies here. Local horse riders have confirmed that they would use a formal crossing. Road incidents in Northamptonshire were up to 66 last year that were reported to BHS, and a serious road incident cost the public purse 2.7 million per incident. Horse riding is included in active travel, which covers any journey that's made by physically active means, including horse riding. Horse riding is also moderate intensity activity, and there are 1,336 horses registered to the NN12 postcode, contributing over 9 million to the local economy. We need to encourage more women and girls to be active, and we know that 88% of the 3.2 million riders in the UK are women, with 85% of children who ride are girls. The proposed toucan crossing is a potential barrier to accessibility for both disabled wheelers and for other users, according to WNLAF. In terms of sustainability, the proposed AL3 crossing over the A43 is less likely to achieve the modal shift targets of 20%, aspiring to 40% for new developments, than the current SB32 location. And that's out of the Joint Core Strategy Local Plan adopted in 2014. There is support for a safe crossing, ideally a bridge over the A43 for all users, and this would make sense to direct all the rights of way impacted north of the A43 to a safe crossing for all users. A bridge crossing is also mentioned in the draft Toaster Elsie Whip summary, January 2024. SB32 may be a good location in terms of land ownership, employment pool, and crowd linkage.
1 minute to go.
Thank you. The government's shared rural network and delivery of sustainable development guidance states that all planned improvements to SRN should consider development of safe and integrated networks for all users, including horse riders. So in summary, the current proposal doesn't provide a sustainable solution for the current, the potential users for SB 32 in view of the current safety issues. It's not used because it's not usable. There's no provision for horse riders who will effectively be confined north of the A43. Pedestrians and especially disabled users will be severely inconvenienced by this alternative route, which is not only for the employees of the setting, but also for local residents and public generally. And the increased traffic in the location will further inhibit safe access of users to the further bridleway network, not just the current SB 32.
Thank you, Ms. Spanner. That's your 5 minutes. Thank you. If you remain now, if we have any questions from the members.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Yes, Councillor.
Thanks, Chairman.
Savage.
Just a question to Mrs. Banner. There's a point raised about the number of horses registered. I think she quoted 1,336 horses registered in the NN postcode. Just confirm that was the fact that she gave out, please.
Yes, it is. So that's the DEFRA figures from 2024. So we know that in the postcode area, which I appreciate isn't necessarily only that your particular area, but it gives us a good indication of the numbers of horses registered and therefore the number of people that potentially want to be getting out and about, but are restricted by the road network and the lack of bridleway network.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for our speaker? Yes, Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Ms. Bannerman. Can you just give some more details about what you mentioned? Disabled people would be impacted by these proposals. If you can just give some more details about that. Thank you.
I can. I mean, from an equestrian point of view, which is the really the perspective that I'm here to give. We know that 24% of people who are involved in equestrian sport have a disability. And of course, having access to a horse is something that means you can have access to the countryside and to get outdoors. Often people with a disability are more likely to be active with a horse than they would have the confidence. Yeah. But I think Wenlaff also had some concerns about the distance for the Toucan crossing because it takes people a long distance. So those who are not equestrians, but those using the Toucan crossing would be at disadvantage as well.
So just to come back, you're really talking about equestrian users who have disabilities, not people with disabilities as a whole, although you do make a point about the Toucan crossing. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So sorry, because I'm reading out Claire's. Claire is the chair of Wenlaff, so her statement is representing Wenlaff and BHS.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Ms. Banner? Okay, thank you, Ms. Banner, for your input, and sorry about the time you've had to wait till you get to make your point. Thank you.
Many thanks.
Right, moving on, we now have Councillor Graham Ferry on behalf of Tiffield Parish Council. I invite to come forward, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm representing Tiffield Parish Council, but I think many of you will know me for my involvement with the campaign for the protection of rural England, and I will be referring to those as I speak. By method of light relief, after all of this session, I would like to take you into the realm of economics, so I'll try not to send you all off to sleep. Before I do so, though, I would quite like to correct Councillor Pritchard and something he said earlier, which I think is really quite important. Councillor Pritchard, you said that the supplementary planning guidance does not apply to AL3. That's not correct. The supplementary planning guidance refers to the decision that was made by Councillor James on that particular meeting. And this is confirmed by the case officer's presentation that you've all got. And it's very clearly referred to that the supplementary planning guidance does kick into place where there is a change to the underlying plan. And I would put it to you that the one reason why there was a very last minute change to the height of the buildings this week was that that was a change that would have triggered this supplementary planning guidance. And we were quick enough to realise that if that happened, then it would apply to the whole site. And I think that's a very important point and should be kept very firmly in mind. But let me go on to my, I'm wasting time. I want to talk about economics. And at the moment, the English economy is in a bit of a mess. Rachel Reeves needs growth to pay for COVID, amongst other things. The economy hasn't grown in the last 12 years. So AL3 is really very important. But AL3 will not create growth either for the county or for the country. IM Properties will face a high-risk strategy to be able to invest, I think, £350 million to develop AL3. And it is our duty to our Chancellor to ensure growth. And that, I suspect, is one of the reasons why nothing has happened for the last 3 years. Some of you heard me describe these massive B8 warehouses as economically sterile. We now begin to see that they're now unwanted by the people who will have to live with them every day, forever, and apparently unwanted by the prospective occupiers in this particular case. For IM Properties, AL3 is beginning to look like a bum deal. If I move on to the document that we've been presented today, I think it's a very poor attempt to convince you that IM Properties deserves detailed planning consent on plot 2. The truth seems to be that they really don't know what they can do with this. They have no idea how to deal with the donkey lane, the Hullcut roundabout, the public right-of-way, or indeed the final position of the plot 2 warehouse. Add to that, their sustainability credentials are in tatters. CPRE presented a challenge to the applicants that they had missed out a big chunk of the story. They had missed out the huge earthworks needed to provide a level plinth to build on. The maths is not complicated. It just needs some experience and some spatial awareness. But we, CPRE, were able also to make a clear point of detail how we got to the numbers.
1 minute, please.
Oh, and it indicated a possible 5,000 lorry loads of topsoil and 5,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions. IM Properties decided they would not correct their application. But they can't claim anymore to have sustainability when they themselves admit to only giving part of the data. So the report presented to you today is incomplete, and I put it to you as members, but also to the officers of West Northants Council, that a meaningful decision is simply not possible based on this illogical and unstructured thinking. I stand in support of meaningful development. I ask you on this occasion to reject this reserve matters discharge with a simple message that it isn't good enough. Thank you, Chair.
Well timed, thank you. Questions for Mr. Ferry? Yes, Councillor Pritchard,
Thank you, Chair.
please.
And also from our speaker's perspective, I brought up this particular point prior to this meeting, and I was advised that AL3 did not conform to the SPD. So perhaps if we could have Mr. Simon Ellis with regards to advising us and the committee whether in fact AL3 was could be actually controlled by the SPD.
I think that'd be very helpful, but it is actually in the case officer's report, and it's really quite clear.
Yeah, if we just pause a second, and Andrew?
So as has been said earlier on, the SPD was adopted after we made a decision to grant the hybrid planning permission. But what the SPD said is if a new planning application is submitted on AL3, then that would be triggered. But a new planning application hasn't been received. We're still dealing with the original planning permission. This is just the reserved matters applications.
Thank you. Any more questions, Mr. Ferry? No, thank you, sir. And finally, I'd invite David Smith and Daniel Butler from Iron Properties to come forward. If you just, sorry, if you just come to the front, give the members the opportunity to ask you any further questions, sorry. And if you need to refer to your technical expert, then that's fine. Members?
That's fine.
For the second chance to question the applicant.
Well, can I just say what I was
You
going
can
to
say what
say?
you
That's
like.
okay. Yeah, I'm not sure I can add too much more to what we've said in the previous item. But what I would say is what we've heard, obviously, from members around the colour scheme and from officers and their suggestions. We're obviously happy to explore that with you. We spent considerable time through the hybrid and the outline of the hybrid process, trying to understand the impacts of different types of colour schemes, and obviously alighted on the banding, which was then enshrined in the condition that the council itself wanted to see, brought forward in the subsequent reserved matters. So we've responded to the requirements of the permission. Having said that, there are lots of ways in which buildings are tackled. We have other ways that we've tackled buildings as well. So if people are happy, we can have a conversation, obviously, with officers to see whether we can find a slight compromise that responds to the concerns that have been raised.
That's good. I'm very sensitive to the colour palettes. We've got it wrong in various places, so I don't want to see that done again. Sorry, have you finished?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Any other? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Mr. Smith, who's quite clearly in charge of Towcester International Airport, because quite clearly all he needs is a couple of runways in between these buildings, because they're hugely vast, as we know, 341 metres wide, 118 metres deep, is absolutely enormous. And I am concerned about the vastness of this. I appreciate that we've had a discussion about this earlier on, but you are in charge of this situation. You have been working for 10 years, so I'm amazed you haven't brought forward something of a smaller, more, should we say, more characteristic in keeping with a rural area design. But putting that to one side, which I'm sure you'll sleep well at night with, can you tell me about the horses, the equestrian links here, and quite clearly a bridge that was mentioned to go over the A43? Would you be considering that? Have you considered the effects of having
Well, I'll stop you on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my question.
No, we'll not allow that question because it's subject of a separate application, which will be considered. So it's not for us to decide or debate that particular issue, being as a separate application in. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Put the question to him.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'll turn to the officer now, if he wants to respond to any of the things around the questioning. We've answered the question of the SPD bit.
Just some discussion around the crossing of the, and basically just to say that with regard to the crossing, the reason for its its design is. I mean, it is a longer crossing having to go across the roundabout, but the whole aspect of that was looking at more of a safe route for people to use. It is accepted it's longer, but it does provide a safe crossing across the A43, and that's all I wanted to add, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're now into debate mode on this, the second application, which is for plot 2. Anybody want to start the debate? Or yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question in terms of the determination, which was has been raised now a couple of times during the meeting today about the DHL application, which obviously, as we know, through the appeal process. Can I just ask a question of Catherine, really, in terms of, is it possible to delay this until the determination has been heard from the appeal?
I don't believe it's relevant, but I will ask the expert on my left, Simon. I don't believe it's any relevance.
It's completely two separate sites, and you've got a framework that unfortunately, a lot of the things that you're debating are outside the framework of what you're already considering, because the hybrid consent's in place, traffic impact has been granted, height parameters granted. So all the issues that were relevant to the DHL appeal, which were height, traffic, aren't relevant to this discussion today and this planning, this reserve matters application. So I can't see how there's a synergy between the two issues, I'm afraid.
On the basis that the land is linked completely, right across the landscape, effectively on that side of the road, surely the outcome of the appeal would be relevant in some respects. We don't obviously know what the inspector would be saying.
Well, the outcome of the appeal wouldn't change those legal parameters that I've set out in terms of what you're assessing and what you're considering here. You're considering the reserve matters in relation to a hybrid consent that's already in place. So I can't see how there's a locus between the DHL inquiry and this decision today.
And to add to that, AL3 obviously came in June 22, and its parameters and sizes was considered by the DHL. So reverse thing, they were there first. DHL will take it into account in terms of what we've got in front of us now, but we're ahead of the game with this one. So waiting for DHL has no relevance, I don't believe, and is backed up by you. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I'm able to ask this question, but that's what I thought. When you actually look back on the situation with regards to traffic, and if I may ask our representative from Highways, is that what modifications will be made to the Northampton Road from the roundabout to the traffic lights in the front of us?
We could ask Hayley, but I mean, it is actually a National Highways project.
No, I think it's.
I don't really want to put
Isn't it
her
one
under
of
pressure.
yours?
Sorry, it's not something that I've been involved in, and certainly not looked at in regards to what's in front of us at the moment and the reason that I'm here. So it's part of a larger scheme, and it's going through our section 38. The whole scheme's going through a section 38 in regards to the stuff that is within the remit of the local highway authority, but that hasn't been completed yet.
Yeah, because when you look at things like the traffic calming and also the amount of traffic that's going to come off the roundabout to bypass the Tove roundabout into the centre of into the centre of Towcester, it's going to be quite significant.
It's not something we're considering today, but obviously it formed part of the hybrid consent.
That's why I asked
but
the question.
In terms of the Northampton Road, there's the shared footpaths and cycleway. There's also a build out which calms traffic along the Northampton Road, and there is a permanent speed sensitive sign, and there's also a new crossing point further down the.
Will there be a weight restriction?
There is there's it's in the report. It is what's called the Unexpected Traffic Impact Fund, and basically if we find an unexpected impact, then one of those options is a weight restriction. So it is possible if certain triggers are met that yes, they could be. But that I can send you details of that post committee.
Okay, thank you.
Well, continuing with that one. What about speed? Obviously, it's national highway. It's national.
I believe the speed limit is 30 miles an hour along the road anyway, so that will remain the same.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Yes, Councillor Anderson.
I'd like to just point out the car parking spaces which are below the WNC standard I mean, they're proposing probably about 450 spaces, 1,650 employees. We know the bus service won't work outside sort of 9 to 5, given the history. I hope that the further applications are going to have an awful lot of car parking, because I just don't see how, if the number of 1,650 people being employed is going to work. Thank you. And I probably would, I mean, I struggle to support this application on the basis of what we said earlier. I respect what Graham Ferrier was saying, was that they've basically gone in for the maximum height, mass of building with no potential tenant, and they haven't found a tenant in 3 years, and we're being asked to approve something which is patently not right for the area. And I struggle to agree with that.
I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Manners. Any more questions? Do we have a proposer?
Chair, do you want those extra conditions?
Yes, I was going to check what the conditions were before you completed that. So we're going for?
Do you want to go with the same ones that you went?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, is there anything other than the 4 we've already discussed that's relevant to this? So, Councillor Jones, you're going to propose,
Yes,
given the 4.
I propose we go with officer's advice. On this
And
one.
with the 4. Councillor Parker.
Happy to second that proposal.
So if there's no more discussions or on this, then we'll put that to the vote. Those that believe we accept officers' recommendations with the 4 conditions we've already gone through, please show. You got that, Diana? And those against? 2. That is carried, and thank you for your attendance today, and there is no further business. Thank you for your attendance.